Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be reviewing Rage, written by Stephen King under the pseudonym Richard Bachman. So before we begin, I'd like to clarify that my previous video comprised of me quickly reviewing 5 books, and I was meant to do a follow-up that comprised of 5 more books, but instead I've opted to split those 5 books into their own individual reviews. I don't know, it was a last-minute change of mind, I guess. So this one's going to focus solely on Rage. And with that out the way, let's begin. So Rage tells the story of Charlie Decker, a high school student who commits a school shooting and takes his entire class hostage. So there's actually a lot to unpack regarding Rage because, aside from just the book itself, there's actually a lot of history and controversy behind it. For instance, it's the first of 7 books that King wrote under the pseudonym Richard Bachman, with the others being The Running Man, Roadwalk, The Long Walk, Thinner, The Regulators, and Blaze. And it was his 4th release overall, coming after Carrie, Salem's Lot, and The Shining. It was first published in 1977, and over the next 20 years or so, it became a subject of controversy due to its connections to real-life school shootings. So much so that King eventually let the book go out of print. So while you are allowed to legally own a copy of it, whether it be the first edition or the first edition of the Bachman books, which is a collection of the first 4 Richard Bachman books, or even the audiobook, if you own any of those things, then you're fine, you won't get into any legal trouble. But it's technically not available for distribution anymore, and if you were to purchase the Bachman books collection today, it completely excludes Rage. So yeah, you can't really buy it. Unless you're willing to pay a steep price, of course, from what I hear. So I'm going to be breaking this review down into 2 parts. The first part comprises of the actual review itself, and the second part will be just the subject matter itself, gun violence, as well as gun control and gun rights and things like that. It's very hard to talk about this book without discussing these things. So what did I think of Rage? I actually enjoyed it. And that doesn't mean I condone the violence or anything like that, don't get the wrong idea. But it's not one of Stephen King's best works. His craft as a writer definitely improved after this book. And of course, a film adaptation would never work today, despite the numerous Stephen King adaptations out there. So yeah, let's jump into it. So there's actually a lot to like about Rage. Firstly, the character of Charlie Decker. He's very relatable and very sympathetic, especially if, you've had a hard time in high school like I did. I'll be honest, I hated high school. His actions are definitely unjustifiable considering he's the one committing the school shooting, but his motives are pretty understandable. He's had a troubled childhood and a troubled high school life, and it just seems that sometimes you can only push a person so far before they finally snap, and I think that's what happened here. Even though King wrote this when he was much younger, I really appreciated his prose here. There's an effective use of adjectives, verbs, metaphors. It reads almost like many of his most iconic works, in my opinion. And considering what Stephen King was going through in his personal life at that time, you can kind of feel the frustration in his writing here. I also found the tension to be very effective. What starts out as essentially a hostage situation slowly morphs into a psychotherapy session, and things get even more complicated when the authorities arrive. There's a lot of relatable themes in Rage, such as poor parenting, bullying, gun control, and just the hardships that come with teachers trying to reach out to every single student in their classrooms. Because let's be honest, it's not that easy. It's also a quick read, it ranges somewhere between 200 to 250 pages, and the ending was quite subversive, yet very effective when you think about it. Now the only issue I have with Rage is that despite its short length, it still meanders a bit from time to time, whether it be in the present or in the flashbacks, It can drag a little bit, but not too much. It doesn't completely take away from the overall experience. I don't know if it's because I listen to the audiobook, and listening to audiobooks isn't something I was used to at the time. But anyways, that's the only issue. Okay, so the review part of the video is over, and now I'm going to discuss some other aspects surrounding the book itself. So there were at least 5 or 6 mass shootings, if I'm correct, that had something to do with rage, because most of the school shooters in these scenarios actually had copies of Rage in their possession. And that's why people were pointing fingers at Stephen King, especially when he was finally ousted as Richard Bachman, because when he wrote the Richard Bachman books under that name, no one knew that these two writers actually shared the same identity, despite some people's suspicions. And when one of these shootings resulted in 8 deaths, that's when King finally decided to pull the plug and let the book go deliberately out of print. And it wasn't until 2013 that he published a non-fiction essay titled Guns, in which he pretty much expresses his advocacy for gun control. Now I'll say this up front, King is not to blame for those shootings. The perpetrators and the perpetrators alone were responsible. It was their actions at the end of the day. Yes, these people had issues, but violence was never the answer. And I'm sure most of them didn't realize this until after those incidents. And just because they were reading the works of Stephen King, or watching classic horror movies, or listening to Marilyn Manson, did not make them killers. There are so many other factors you have to consider. What goes on in the households. These people being bullied in school. Were they dealing with mental health issues of sorts? I'd also like to clarify that despite my personal tastes in music, movies, TV shows, and literature, and despite my appreciation for a book like Rage, I denounce the violence in it, because mass shootings are still going on around the world today. And if people don't take action, then nothing will change. And the last thing is gun control itself. As I've said before on this channel, I don't know whether to support it or oppose it. I'm still kind of in the middle as always. I do believe that everyone has the right to bear firearms, with the understanding that said firearms are used responsibly. And I wish people stood by that. But I also believe that certain laws need to be implemented in order to reduce the risks affiliated with gun rights. Charge extra for bullets, restrict guns in certain areas and stuff like that. I say all of this because I don't believe in the democratic ideology of just taking all guns away from all legal gun owners. Because that won't change anything. In fact, it'll make it worse, There'll be some kind of black market around the corner that sells guns illegally, and then we all know what'll happen from there. Now, I get that the perpetrators are also to blame for these incidents, aside from just the guns themselves. But if they didn't have the guns in their possession, it would make a huge difference. And I'm not expecting people to agree with me, Politically, I disagree with people on both sides of the spectrum. So on the whole, it's a very difficult issue to navigate, especially for governments around the world, but I'm sure one day we'll see a change. Who knows? And yeah, that's it. That's pretty much the video, guys. So next time, we're going to be revisiting the world of Midworld, as I review the 3rd Dark Tower book, The Wastelands. I just finished it as of this recording, and I can't wait to talk about it, so look forward to that very soon. And yeah, thank you all for watching, guys. Please be sure to like the video, share it, and subscribe. Ring the bell. Take care, and I'll see you soon.